Hello, I'm James, and I've got another little James Blainer for you. This time we're going to take a look at prep globals and bag manipulation. So, without further ado, let's imagine that you want to run this little horror, and you want to get him in the field and doing damage as soon as possible. What is the best way to go about that? Well, you could just buy dice and roll them in the traditional way. So let's have a go at that. I'm not going to roll them because it'll take forever, but let's imagine that I have gone second and I've rolled these 4 dice. I'm going to buy Iceman, and at the end of my turn, this energy will come down to here. Next turn, this is my bag. These will come out, and let's imagine that I roll this. I could buy another Iceman or a magic missile, but maybe my opponent has bought a Shriek, and I think I might need to sort that out, so I shall buy my own. She will come into used. And then I have an energy that I can't really do much with, but maybe my opponent has a psychic that I need to ping out, so let's imagine that goes there. And at the end of my turn, this will come down. And on turn 3, I need to draw 4 dice, but my bag's empty, so this lot will come into my bag. Now, Sod's Law says that the first 4 dice I pull on turn 3 will be these 4, and then on turn 4, I'll pull those 4, and eventually on turn 5, I'll pull those 2 that I was really after. Surely we can do better than that. Enter the Prep Global. We have Resurrection. Pay a shield once per turn. On your turn, draw a die from your bag and prep it. We have Atlas, which is the same thing but using fists. And we have Villainous Pact, which is using masks and has the requirement that you have no dice in your prep area. For this team, maybe I'm going to want to fill it up with characters, so I might not have space for Atlas, and I don't want that restriction from Villainous Pact, so I'm going to use Resurrection. Now, remember that without a prep global, Iceman might come out, if you're lucky, on turn 3, or he might come out on turn 4, or even turn 5. So let's see how it's different with a prep global. Turn 1 is basically going to be the same, okay? I'm going to use the 4 energy to buy Iceman, and then at the end of the turn, these dice will come down into the use pile. Turn 2, things will be a bit different. These will come out, I'll roll them, and I will immediately use 1 energy to use the Resurrection Global, so to prep a die from my bag. But my bag's empty, so I have to refill it, and crucially, I only refill it with the dice which are in the use pile, not in the out of play area. You did watch the out of play video, right? So I will take 1 of these dice, and it might end up being a psychic, or it might be Iceman. It doesn't matter in the end. As you will see, that will go into prep, and then I will buy my Shriek. End of turn 2, these will come down into used, and at the beginning of turn 3, I need to pull 4 dice from my bag, and lo and behold, Iceman will definitely come out. If he didn't already come out, he will certainly come out now. So in using the prep global, I have guaranteed that Iceman will definitely come out on turn 3. Bingo! It's well worth having another quick look at how the dice move through that sequence, and this time I've added a 2-cost bolt in the form of a yellow lantern ring to my team, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so first turn as before, I buy Iceman. End of turn 1, these come down. Turn 2, I draw these, I resurrect as before. My bag's empty, so I pull those into my bag and draw 1. And then, as before, I buy the Shriek. End of turn 2, these come down. Okay, turn 3, I know that I'm going to pull those, and let's say I'm lucky enough to field on turn 3 Iceman, leaving me with 3 energy. I want to resurrect again, because my bag's empty, which means that when I resurrect, these 5 will go in, and 1 will get drawn, which means I'll pull all of those on the next turn. But now I'm left with only 2 energy, so you see why I added a 2-cost to my team. In fact, probably I'll be pumping that into Iceman, perhaps, but let's say I don't want to do that for some reason. So I'm going to buy the 2-cost, end of turn 3, those move down, turn 4, I'm going to draw those, and let's say I'm lucky enough to field Shriek. Again, I've got 5 here, so if I use Resurrection, that'll put 5 into my empty bag. I'll draw 1 of them, and at the start of next turn, which will be turn 5, I will pull those 4 dice. And again, I've got 2 energy, and again, maybe I'll be using it on Iceman, but let's say I buy something. At the end of turn 4, those dice will come down, Turn 5, I will draw these dice. And you can see by splitting my dice effectively into two piles, by taking advantage of the outer play area, every turn I will draw, every turn after the fourth, I will draw and roll what I bought on the previous turn. And that is utterly predictable. And that consistency, that predictability, really helps to win games. Beyond predictability of what comes next, there are other benefits to using prep globals to split your dice in this way. Here we are at the start of turn 3. Let's imagine for a second that I miss my Iceman. Imagine that happening. First of all, I have a little cry, and then I think, okay, well, what can I do about that? One possible approach would be to use this energy to buy another Iceman and then resurrect. Now, I've got 6 here, so that's 6 going in there, 1 coming out, and only 4 of these, of course, will come out next turn. So I'm not guaranteed to pull the Iceman, but I've got a good shot at recovering, and on turn 4, I might well be rolling a second Iceman. Let's see how that recovery compares to life without a prep global. So back to the traditional method of turn 1, buying Iceman, turn 2, Shriek and spending the extra energy on something. Turn 3, this lot will go into my bag, unless I get lucky and pull out the 2 that I want and 2 more psychics, and then I get horribly unlucky and miss them both. What can I do about it? Well, I could perhaps buy another Iceman, so let's try that. Turn 4, I'm definitely not getting Iceman, and I'm running out of things to buy, so I don't know, let's buy a couple of lantern rings. They're a nice bulk supply. And a turn, that comes down. Turn 5, I will pull those 2 psychics and then refill my bag with this little lot. And there's a chance that I might pull an Iceman, but more likely I'm going to pull something else. So that will be turn 5, that will be turn 6, and Sod's Law says I'll get to Iceman on turn 7. And I will be a sad bunny. So, using a prep global not only gives us ramp, that is to say more dice to roll, but also allows us to guarantee a turn 3 pull of Iceman, makes it more predictable what we're going to pull out of the bag next turn, helps us to recover from disaster more effectively, and other things besides, which you'll see later. So why don't we use it on the first turn? Why do we have to wait until turn 2? Well, let's check it out then. Okay, so turn 1 going second. I can't buy Iceman if I want to use the Resurrection Global, so I'll have to buy Shriek. And then I'll resurrect 1 from my bag, prep it. End of turn 1, they'll come down. Turn 2, I'll draw those 3, and I'll immediately have to do a bag refill. And there's a chance that I'll pull Shriek, which would not be the worst thing on turn 2, but there's a higher chance that I'll pull something else. So I'll get those 5. And let's say, okay, I want to use the resurrection again every turn. Resurrection is great. Let's do it every turn. So I'll buy my Iceman because I'm going to win the game ultimately. Let's resurrect. Let's move those down at the end of turn 2. Now turn 3, I am certainly guaranteed to pull my Shriek, which is pretty cool. And I have to refill my bag again, and I need 1 more die. Now I could pull the Iceman, but it's much more likely that I will not. So on turn 3, there's a chance of Iceman, but not a particularly high one. So, while there are some reasons to use a prep global on turn 1, for example, if you're desperate to buy a 5 cost on turn 2, generally speaking, it's not the best idea. So using a prep global from turn 2 onwards allows you to get your win con out more quickly than if you didn't use it. It does wonders for your consistency, and it helps you to respond to bad dice rolls. But can we refine this process a little bit more? Well, it turns out we can. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that on turn 2 so far, we've always resurrected first, which meant moving these 5 dice into the bag and then prepping 1 of them. And then we use this energy to buy the Shriek. But what if we did it the other way around? What if we bought the Shriek first and then used the Resurrection Global to move these 6 dice into the bag and prep 1 of them? Would that be better? Well, the fact is that it's good and bad. The really good news is that changing the order has meant that both of our target dice have gone into the bag and stand a pretty good chance of coming out when I pull 4 dice at the start of turn 3, which is a real improvement. The bad news is twofold. Most obviously, we're no longer guaranteed to draw Iceman on turn 3 because we have 5 dice here now instead of 4, so there's every chance we could just leave Iceman in the bag. The second problem is that leaving 1 die in the bag is going to come back to bite us in the bum the next time we use the Resurrection Global, and that's going to be particularly awkward if we miss the rolls on Shriek and Iceman on turn 3. You might remember that when we rezzed 5 dice into the bag and then missed our Iceman roll on turn 3, we recovered by buying another Iceman and had a pretty good shot at drawing and rolling that straight away on turn 4. But rezzing 6 dice into the bag makes it all a bit more ugly. At the end of turn 2, these will come down into the use pile, and then at the start of turn 3, let's say we get lucky and draw the 2 dice that we want, but we get kind of unlucky and we roll them all to energy. We can try to recover like we did last time by buying Iceman, but when we come to try and use the Resurrection Global to split up these 2 piles of dice, it's not going to work because we still have that little die stuck in the bag. So the only thing that's going to come out is this. And then at the end of turn, these will move down to here. And when I come to draw at the start of turn 4, I'm going to have a hard time picking out an Iceman die from that lot. So rezzing 6 dice on turn 2 gives me the distinct possibility of pulling both of my target dice on turn 3. But I lose the guarantee of the turn 3 Iceman, and if it all goes a bit pear-shaped, I might have a harder time recovering from it. Is there any way we can get the advantage without the disadvantages? In other words, is there any way we can fix the 6? Basically, this is a puzzle about how to add another die to here and yet still pull everything in the use pile next turn. Either you need to pull more dice through your bag, so increase your churn, or you need to reduce the number of dice which are in the use pile somehow. If you want to pull more dice through your bag, then what you need is another prep global. So either on your team or perhaps more likely on your opponent's team, keep an eye out and see if they've got Atlas or another Resurrection or Villainous Pact. And then you can prep 2 dice, so the 6 dice is no longer a problem because they'll all come out next time. Obviously 2 preps requires 2 energy though, so instead of buying Shriek, you might have to buy something like Lantern Ring. Okay, let's use Resurrection first, and then Atlas. And if one of the 2 globals you're planning to use is Villainous Pact, remember that that requires no dice in the prep areas, so you need to use that one first. As for reducing the number of dice in your use pile, you've got a few options. You could field a Psychic using Professor X, no more, Magnus! Or in Golden, you could use Ring. Or you could use the same Ring Global or the new Clayface Global to pay 1 energy into Outer Play to take 1 die from your use pile and place it on an energy face in your reserve. If you go the Psychic route, you're not going to be left with enough energy in the reserve pool to pay for Shriek and Resurrection. So instead, you're going to have to buy a 2 cost like the Lantern Ring again, and then Resurrect. On the bright side, that does leave you with a Psychic in the field, which is a very handy thing for an Iceman team. If you go for the other option, you're effectively moving 1 energy from your use pile up into Outer Play, so you're still going to have enough energy to buy Shriek and Resurrect. You might notice that just rolling a Psychic on turn 2 and fielding it is not really going to help the situation because it doesn't change the number of dice in your use pile. But if we could roll a Psychic on turn 1, that would be a different story. If it was 2/3 costs that I wanted to buy on turns 1 and 2, it might not be the hardest thing in the world to field a Psychic on the first turn. But when I want to get a 4 cost, like Iceman, it seems like an impossible task to also field a Psychic. But never fear, Kree Captain Global is here to save the day. This global makes the impossible possible and allows us to pay 2 fists and a bolt for our Iceman on turn 1 and field a Sidekick. And then on turn 2 we can do our thing, buy our Shriek and res 5 into the bag and 1 out. Bingo. The same global allows you to stick to the plan and get Iceman out on turn 3, even when you go in first and rolling just 3 dice. Although you will, on turn 2, need a little help from the Clayface global to fix your bag. And then you pay for your Shriek, resurrect those, and next turn you'll be rolling those. Nice. So you can use these techniques to make sure you've got the right number of dice going in the bag and guarantee that your first 3 turns are as smooth and predictable as possible. But of course, it doesn't end there. Unless you've just pulled off a gross turn 3 win, you need to keep looking at all the globals and all the action dice on both sides of the table and all of your character effects and see how those can help you to manage your bag and the contents of your used pile so that you pull the right thing at the right time. Phew! I hope you found this video useful. Please leave a comment, like, subscribe and share. Take care of yourselves and may the dice rolls be ever in your favour.